Firstly, thank you and welcome to everyone who's joined our Equality and Diversity Charter webinar. For me, it's a great honour, really proud moment to not only represent myself, my organisation, and also Bali, but to talk on behalf of some of the UK's largest and most significant membership groups today. As you can see them written on the board. Not only are they great membership groups that are branded and recognised in themselves, but some of their members are, superstars, recognised record breakers, and leaders in their specific field. So it's really a proud moment to be able to represent all of these organisations. Just with that, I'd like to, before we move on to the charter group and what we're about and who we are, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Bali, Wayne Grills in particular, who's helped us from the absolute beginning to get where we are within Bali off the ground, which has then helped us to work with so many of these brilliant membership groups, and for all the people from these membership groups that have been joining our meetings to help us get this far. It's a huge thank you to you all. So what are we? What is the charter group? So we're a group of members of membership organisations. It started off back in 2021, where we had a EDI meeting, and the conversation was amazing. We had a Manoj Molde, we had Mark Lane, we had Flo Headlam, we had Ashley Edwards, we had Dr. Eriku McMorris, we had Helen Waddington. All of them sat on a stage and spoke about their ED&I around mental health, around inclusion, culture, religion, and it was absolutely mind-blowing and tearful as well as people spoke about their experiences. And at that meeting, we had a number of membership organisations, and we said we need to continue the conversation. We need to really promote ED&I, and certainly just get more minds working together. As an offset from this, and there is a real reason, is that our industry, the economy, is projected from the Oxford Economics, is that it's projected that by 2030, the horticultural and landscaping industry will be at 41 billion by 2030. It was previously 28.8 billion in 2019. So it's a huge growth, and we need to recognise that we have to get a number of people into our industry, and they will come from lots and lots of different backgrounds. We have a skill shortage, and we have a working and we have an aging workforce, which unfortunately I'm one of them. But that is the fact of our industry. So ED&I and sustainability is just a part of what we need to do to help us maximise and actually meet that growth for 41 billion by 2030. So the charter group, we are a group of those organisations that you saw. What we committed to, very simply, was to commit to create an inclusive culture and measure how we engage and improve our representation across the board. We wanted to support and develop, as you can see, the industry. I think it's a great industry. I think that you'll see diversity across the board. And one thing I do know is a very welcoming industry. We want to recognise and monitor equality and diversity. So a lot of it's about us talking about it, and then it's about monitoring. And then later on in years to come, I'm sure in a few years, it's about implementation, as I've been taught very well so far. We want to provide access to resources. It's really, really important that people don't know. And if you don't know, ask. And that's one of the key things that we want people to do, certainly today as well. It's about educating and upskilling, and we agreed that we want to promote the industries, its fully inclusivity as we go forwards, as we move forwards in these coming years. Next slide. So today's webinar, the next phase of our journey. You've seen us already put out a survey, which really happy. We had hundreds and hundreds of respondents. It's really helped us shape where we are, and we've been able to provide some funding from that to actually have Gamil on board and Diversity Marketplace, which we're really proud to have, because we went through a process. Gamil, you're brilliant and fantastic and came out #1. So we're really proud to have real expert support and advice in our journey, the journey for us and the journey for our members, and also the journey for the industry. So we're really pleased with that. The group, we will talk about some of our actions at the end. And as I said, we've done the survey. We're now going to build upon it, and we really want to improve our engagement. So thank you to everybody that's taken your time out this evening before your tea to listen to Gamil. So and Diversity Marketplace. So take it away.
Adrian, thank you very much. And I'd just like to say at the start, one, I'm delighted to be working with the sector, and to look at how we can improve the diversity, but also to make sure that the sector becomes inclusive. So many organizations will be really diverse, but they're not inclusive. So what tends to happen is that diversity is not utilized to its best. And if we use a very simple example, so many people with autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD in organizations are not maximizing on their potential, or they're not reaching their potential because they're not given the right level of support or reasonable adjustments. I mean, I'm dyslexic, and I got diagnosed last year, always knowing that I'm dyslexic, but I decided to just do it and get diagnosed. So far, just by doing 2 minor adjustments, I'm saving 5 hours every single week through not having to, write down 100 notes and get them transcribed, etc. But now by using a couple of, very cheap tools, it's actually supported me to be much more productive at what I do. But that's just one thing. So if I introduce myself, so my name is Gamil Yaffa, and I'm going to rattle through this. So I've been a diversity and inclusion strategist for 24 years. Spent 9 years heading up diversity practices for marketing, branding, recruitment, advertising organizations, set up Diversity Marketplace in 2005. We're now a team of diversity strategists, analysts, researchers, auditors, facilitators, trainers. I've written a couple of books, and one called Demystifying Diversity, another one called Yemen Proud, which is my proud heritage. I'm a trustee for Women Leaders UK. I'm also a founding member of Milton Keynes Ethnic Business Community, where we have 350 ethnic businesses that we support just in Milton Keynes. I spent 6 years as a trustee for the Parks Trust, and that gave me a really good insight into some of the issues and challenges within the sector. These are just some of our clients, but whilst you browse through this, we're seeing lots of change. And I've seen, you could say, change happen over the last 24 years, but not fast enough. I would say in the last 2 years, we've seen more change happen than we did in the last 22 years. What we're starting to see now is the movement from just raising awareness to embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, we've still got 2 more stages beyond that, which are the impacting and the sustaining, and we're nowhere near that yet. So this evening, I want to spend time with you, one, trying to level the playing field in terms of knowledge. So there's some foundations of ED&I that I will share with you, but also I'm after insights from you in terms of your experience of the culture within the sector. And what we will do is we'll combine all of the data together with all the data that we gathered from the last session, and I'll give you next steps towards the end of this session. So much going on, but still so much more needs to be done. We're going to be using Mentimeter, so you're going to need your mobile phone, or if you can scan the QR code, and this allows us to get feedback from you, that's directly from you, so that we will be able to see all of the feedback on the screen. The brilliant thing about Mentimeter is it does not gather any information about you. It is totally anonymous. So hopefully giving you the safety to know that what you say, can be shared without anybody else finding out. So if you can't scan the QR code, if you can enter menti.com as on the screen and enter the code, which is 8560620. And we'd really appreciate it if as many of you as possible could contribute, because your contributions combined with the contributions of the first session will help us create that action plan and also help us identify where the gaps are and what we need to be doing in order to fill those gaps around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So please continue to join via Mentimeter. Now, on most of the slides, the code will be at the top of the screen. So you'll see join at Mentimeter and then use code 8560620. As soon as I move to the next slide, it will ask you some questions. And I know you can't see this on here, but on your phone, you'll be able to just list. So we're really interested to know, again, which organizations you are members of. If you're a member of 2 or more, please, tick both of those organizations, because it just gives us an idea who's represented on these sessions and who isn't. Because it's really important, because then we can go back to those bodies and say, right, what else can we be doing to support you in order to, to raise awareness of diversity, equity, and inclusion? So great start. Thank you very much. So once again, I'm going to share lots of information with you, but I need to gather data from you or information from you in order to have an idea as to, one, why you think it's important for the sector to drive diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you think about the real business case for you, we know that the population of the UK is growing dramatically and it's diversifying dramatically. We know that during COVID, more and more individuals from different ethnic minority backgrounds actually ventured a lot further out. They started to explore the green space, the woods, the lakes, and everything else. And I know that myself, I spent so much time in my garden, but I had to have it landscaped, and I'd love to show you it because I believe it looks brilliant. But I had to have that done, and that cost me 10K. So more and more individuals from minority backgrounds will be looking at what they do and how they do it, and how much time they spend out and about. So Chartered Institute of Housing, is that a requirement? Because again, some people will get involved in diversity and inclusion because it's either a legal requirement or they have a society or a body that tells them that they have to. But also when you start, if you're a large business and you procure services from local authorities or from any other public body, you're going to have to do a tender, and you're going to have to show your social value. You're going to have to show, why they should join, why they should choose you, and what you're doing around diversity and inclusion. So let's just read through a few of these. To be relevant to society, it makes business and economic sense due to the knowledge and skills of a wider pool of talent. To future-proof the industry and ensure evolution of our creative ideas. To be honest with you, we're actually moving from an evolution. I've always talked about diversity and inclusion as an evolution. We're actually seeing revolutions in certain areas. And this is individuals within certain sectors that actually push their sector to drive diversity, equity, and inclusion, to be open to everyone, to make everyone feel welcome, to sustain the industry by assessing all the potential talent. Everybody has a talent. However, we as leaders, and by leaders, anybody can be a leader as long as they create followers. And these followers are, are people that we are serving. So when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we talk about inclusive leadership, we talk about servant leadership, and we talk about, how we can better support others. So what do we mean when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion? So if we just focus on diversity, and again, this gives us a benchmark in terms of individuals' knowledge or sector knowledge in terms of, what do we mean when we talk about diversity? So for me, there are three things, and once we've been through a few of these questions, I will give you my views on what diversity, equity, and inclusion is, because they all mean different things, but we have a habit of combining all three, when really we need to focus on them individually. A range of people with different life experiences. Somebody's been listening to some of my webinars. Looking at people that don't look like ourselves. Nice. The range of different people we engage. Okay. Showing the full range of, human experience. And that's the first time that's appeared this evening. Almost everything we need to do around diversity and inclusion is being human. And that's simple things like, kindness, understanding, empathy, people with a wide range of characteristics, including intersectionality, and I'll talk through intersectionality a bit later on. A wide range of individuals from different backgrounds, cultures, and beliefs, involving everyone. Now, including everyone, involving everyone. And this is where sometimes we get inclusion and diversity mixed up, because inclusion is about what we do with the diversity that we have, and that includes including and belonging, etc. But I'll go through more of that in a short while. So being open to all people with a variety of backgrounds, upbringings, genders, etc. So question to you for the industry, and again, you've worked in the industry for a long time. Some of you will have been successful in recruiting diversity. So what can we do to increase that diversity in the sector? What are you doing to increase that diversity in the sector? Better recruitment practices. Yep. Does that mean exploring policies, practices, procedures? Recruit through different channels. And again, we'll talk through some of those channels a bit later. Better outreach. Absolutely. How many of you, and again, you don't have to answer this, how many of you have been into a mosque, a synagogue, a temple, a gurdwara, or an Asian Women's Project, or an African Caribbean Center? I'm sure some of you have, but I'm sure a lot of you haven't. Have role models and try to be better in all we do, say, and act. Diverse role models to communicate. Absolutely. This is about role models who will be proactive and visible, not just visible, but have a voice internally and externally. It's about using social media effectively. It's about conversations around additional needs. Absolutely. 20% of your workforce will be, will have a disability. 15% of them will be neurodivergent, with additional needs that will, when you've given them those additional, when you've given them those reasonable adjustments, you will find that they're starting to operate on a much higher level than they did. Outreach into community. This is brilliant. Thank you. Be accountable. And, and within every organization, somebody needs to be accountable. Then everybody else needs to be responsible. If we talk about stakeholders, they need to be communicated with. Be proactive. about wanting to attract. And also, that proactivity is about being intentional as well. So thank you very much. So what do we mean when we talk about equity? We've been shifting over the last few years from talking about equality to talking about equity. What's the difference? What do we mean? Being fair for everyone. We've got a few diversity and inclusion experts here. Parity of opportunity. Nice. And again, it's okay to say you don't know. I mean, to be honest with you, one of my favorite answers on any of these is I don't know. Thank you very much. And again, we need to be comfortable saying I don't know, because if we're going to engage with groups of individuals who are different to us, it's really important that when we start to have those uncomfortable conversations, they're only uncomfortable because we don't have them. And if we don't know, if we don't know something, let's just tell people we don't know. Okay, meeting individual needs, fairness first. I'm here to find out. I'll share with you shortly. Level playing field, fit for purpose, not one solution for all. And again, it is about having the right approach to individuals. So recognizing people face barriers. And that's one of the most important things to recognize on these different events is, some of us will not have any negative experiences. And sometimes because we don't, we assume that nobody else does. Not always the case. So what do we mean by inclusion? And some of you gave that answer for diversity, so just repeat it. And I mean that nicely. I remember writing my first article for the British Medical Journal in 2003, and it was called Diversity and Doctors. And I started using the term inclusivity in terms of how doctors, particularly with minority communities really valued and respected the words of doctors. So one of my suggestions at the time was that doctors actually hold out of our conversations with, men and women to actually talk them through different issues that they may be experiencing, but are very reticent to actually talk about. So, okay, not being exclusive, absolutely, ensuring everyone feels included, recognizing difference and create to involve everyone equally, being invited onto the dance floor after being invited to the disco. Nice. There are lots and lots of nice analogies, really good analogies around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So to me, diversity is simple. Diversity, and again, our language needs to change. We need to be so much more simplistic in the way that we use our language around diversity and inclusion. Diversity just means difference. But as somebody quoted earlier, to me, there are three different ideas of diversity. One is diversity of our inherent diversity, who we're born to, where we're born, the color of our skin when we're born, the parents that we have, whether they're rich or poor, whether we're born with a disability, etc. So that's our inherent diversity. Then our experiential diversity is everything that we've done from the day we're born right through to today. So all of your lived experiences, the number of brothers and sisters that you grew up with, the schools that you went to, the friendships that you went to, whether you went to an affluent school or poor school, you lived in an affluent or poor area, your education, your college, your university, who you engaged with, how often you traveled, where you traveled to, your workplace, all of your work friends, are they identical to you or are they different? And the social media that you use and the news that everything else, all of that is your experiential diversity. And all of that leads to your cognitive diversity, that diversity of creativity, innovation, and thinking, particularly marginalized groups. will have to have navigated around so many different systems. They find different ways of doing things. So in terms of equity, very simple diagram. Equality means giving everybody the same thing. Equity, which is the second illustration, means giving people what they need in order to progress. And another example of this is, when COVID hit, banks gave everyone a laptop, which is equality. The problem was 20% of their staff couldn't use those laptops because they weren't adapted in the right ways for their needs. The software, even individuals who were colorblind, so many individuals weren't able to use those laptops. So equality is giving everybody a laptop. Equity is giving a laptop that's, that has the reasonable adjustments and the software and everything else to meet their needs. Inclusion is about taking away the barriers. And inclusion, so diversity is all about the people. Inclusion is what we do with the individuals, what we do with that diversity. Do we include that diversity in decision-making within our organization, or is that diversity at the lowest levels of the organization so they don't get to contribute in the right way? So again, before I ask that question, I just want to verify, authenticity and authentic self, and you will have heard those terms, or best self, etc. To me, it's two things. One, not feeling that you have to cloak yourself because of your disability, your sexual orientation, your religion and belief, or your race. And I know loads of people who will not talk about going to a Muslim wedding on a Saturday because of fear of Islamophobia from their colleagues on a Monday morning at work. They will not talk about Islam at all. That's cloaking who you are. So, not being able to talk about your sexual orientation, your disability, or your race, your religion is part of not being able to be your authentic self. The second part is not being able to be, the best that you can be in terms of using your knowledge, your skills, your experience, all of that stuff that you bring into this industry because your managers want to do things a certain way. Or you're not, you've been told that you can be creative, but when you stop being creative, you get rejected. So how much of your authentic selves do you bring to work? And it's really interesting to see, and it was interesting to see the last one. Please try and populate this as much as you can, because again, this gives us an idea of, one, how productive individuals are, but also what, trying to identify what those barriers are that stop people being their authentic self. And it's really important, I can tell you now that we did 57 of these last year, and I mean, you're doing not badly considering, but if we added up all of those, 25% of people within organizations didn't feel they could bring, 50% of themselves to work. That, has a huge impact, one on the individual, but also on the organization. But again, please keep adding to this if you've got more to say, more to add. The other important factor is, why are you not able to be your authentic self? For all of you that, put that you couldn't be more than, I mean, ideally we should be able to bring 80% of ourselves to work or more. That would be, the minimum, I would say. So why are you not able to bring more of yourselves to work? And this is really interesting. It can be career limiting. As long as your authentic self doesn't have a negative impact on anybody else, you should be able to bring your authentic self to work. Don't want to be judged. The thing is, inclusion, my definition of inclusion is the absence of fear and judgment. You know, we need to get rid of that concept, that feeling that we're being judged, and we're fearful of that. The sector needs, and this is where that culture change, the organizational culture, how things are done in organizations. My manager has verbally made it clear that she irritated by the by the neurodivergent lot. She doesn't know what she's missing. But anyway, I second that. Different structures at work. I can now, but previously it was feared. The only way we can encourage others to recognize and to talk about their neurodivergency is to step forward and to actually talk about ours. And so this is about culture change. It's about creating that culture of inclusion. So what do we mean by exclusion? It's literally the interactions with others that make one feel as though they are invisible or left out. Experiencing social or professional exclusion is associated with a host of negative outcomes. And again, our mental health is impacted. Our ability to perform to the best of our ability is impacted. So have you felt excluded in your organization, and why? This is your opportunity, not just to tell us or to talk about it, but also to help us understand what the different issues and challenges are within organizations, within the sector. And once again, it's totally anonymous, and we will add all of this information that we're gathering now with information that we gathered on the first webinar. But yes, on the basis of seniority, education, and perceived, and I love that, perceived experience. No, but I am the business owner. Thank you for your honesty. Yes, because I don't think the same way. I don't look right. For a more senior role. Not excluded, but judged. So I self-exclude. It's really important that we share this so that other people see, that others are being excluded and being judged in a sense, because people make decisions based on the judgments they make. So you might not be consciously excluded, but you could be excluded unconsciously. So listen, thank you again for sharing. One of the projects we did with Rolls-Royce a few years ago was we got 5 of their senior leaders, a CEO, an MD, and vice president, to talk about their vulnerabilities, to talk about mental health. One talked about mental health, another one talked about coming out as gay, and how the organization supported them. But also a woman within the organization talked about why she'd never start work before 9 o'clock in the morning and never finish work after 5, because she had 5 kids and those kids were her priority. But what she did was she developed her staff in a way that they were able to complete their work in those set times, and that was role modeling behaviors. And what that webinar did, that webinar was to 55,000 members of staff. What that did was it encouraged other people to contact their employee assistance program to seek help and support. So the more you're able to bring more of yourself to work, the better you will feel in terms of your mental health, but also the better the organization will gain your creativity, innovation, thinking, experience, and ability. So what do you think are the hallmarks? What would you like the hallmarks of an inclusive organization to be? So what does an inclusive organization look like? And try and think of it from a diversity point of view. For somebody with a disability, for somebody, different gender, different sexual orientation, race, religion. And so many organizations are doing are doing stuff, but sometimes it's just not enough. Well, not sometimes, most of the times it's not enough. So gender balance, it is, naturally embedded in the culture and not forced. It should be diversity, equity, and inclusion. When you break it down, is just good business practice. It's about maximizing on the potential of every individual, removing the barriers that exist to them being able to perform at 100% or 90%. Because if you've got staff performing at 70, 60, 70, or even 80%, you're missing it. That's 1/5 the productivity in your organization. Imagine what would happen if all of those individuals were able to be their true selves. Mindful, respectful, understanding, inclusive, many different people with complementary skills, different races, creeds, and colors. Ask for feedback. Feedback is so important. A place where you don't have to ask for additional support. I would love to see a place like that. I talk to so many people who will talk to their managers about reasonable adjustments, and 3 months later, they might get a call from HR. And a lot of this really saddens me. Successful, absolutely. That's what an organization looks like that is inclusive of the people within its organization. Good employee retention, yeah, fantastic. Access to support groups, both internally and externally. So some hallmarks for me and things that I think about when I think of an inclusive ecosystem. One, everybody has a voice. You feel like you belong. You are unique, but that uniqueness is recognized as your added value. It's what you bring to the team. It's what you bring to the organization. It's that difference that you will, contribute that makes you unique. You feel valued and respected, and your dignity is respected. You learn and develop, and that's something that happens every single day. Whether it's learning with colleagues, learning on your own, or learning from different situations, but you are constantly in that developmental stage. So you are constantly growing through the organization. You collaborate with your colleagues. You have access to resources. You have an inclusion strategy. So just looking at every organization, I know every individual here, or most of you, will represent different organizations or bodies. Most organizations, when I ask the question, so where are you in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And most organizations are saying, well, we're progressive. And I said, where's the evidence for that? They have no evidence. So we actually are involved. I'm one of 112 expert panelists on the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion benchmark. And this is a maturity matrix that we use on that benchmark to actually identify where organizations are. But what I'd like to do is just find out where you are as an organization. So are you at level 1, inactive, not even on your radar? Level 2, reactive. You are literally complying with legislation or governing bodies. Level 3 is proactive. So you've started to really raise awareness of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you're starting to monitor, measure, and manage progress. Level 4 is progressive, meaning that you've started to you've done all of your monitoring, measuring, and managing. You know exactly where you are in terms of the whole organization, from recruitment, retention, development, sustainability, procurement, learning and development, HR, leadership behaviors, and all of those things. You're starting to, you're monitoring, measuring, and managing. And what you're doing now is you're seeing which areas need improvement and which areas can you progress on. Level 5 is best practice. You are exemplar. So where are you in terms of good diversity and inclusion practice? And once we've got all of your feedback, I'll tell you where most organizations are. from the perspective of 112 expert panelists that work all over the world. See, I'm seeing some realism here. Most organizations globally are still moving from level 2 to level 3. And some of them are still purely in level 2. So thank you very much for sharing. Where do you want to be as a sector? You know, and level 3 is fine if you're moving from level 2. You know, the thing is, this is a long-term activity. It's not something that a half-day training program on inclusive leadership is going to alter. It's about culture change, and it's about embedding that change so that things happen every single day. Thank you very much for sharing. It's great to see that you want to progress. So what can you do to drive diversity, equity, and inclusion in your organization? Again, think of the simple things. One thing I always say to people is think about who you work with and think about the person that you spend the most amount of time with, and think about the person that you spend the least amount of time with, and go and spend some time with that person. Because we tend to spend most of our time with the people that we like, the people that we get on with, the people that we have the most in common with. So be vocal, recognize the gaps, lead by example, educate, and continue to be educated. Ensure it is part of every change made. Every single thing that you do in your organization that involves people involves inclusion or diversity. Active listening. Brilliant. What can leaders do? So what are your expectations in terms of your leadership behavior, your leadership activity in driving diversity, equity, and inclusion? Empathy training. I do love empathy training because we need to be, and what that relates to for me is the ability to put ourselves in the shoes of others who are disadvantaged or who are marginalized. Lead by example, more diverse faces in management. Absolutely, it's not just going to happen. We have to make it happen. We have to be proactive, whether that means starting development programs for those minority groups that already work in the industry, or bringing in individuals from outside the industry. But we have to start somewhere. Lead from the front, learn and be at the forefront of change, be proactive, role model behaviors. Brilliant. So we've talked about some of the good stuff that we need to be doing. There are barriers that exist in organizations. One of those biggest barriers is organizational culture. And what I mean by that is, when we start to look at leadership in organizations, to me, there is an explicit culture that leaders have. And that culture is that leaders, they don't feel that, and again, this is based on 42 pieces of research that we've done over 20 years with organisations from the Welsh Assembly to Scottish Government to police forces, universities, etc., etc. So you've got this explicit culture where senior leaders do not think that they are excluding anybody. They do not feel that they are acting in a way that makes people feel less of who they are, or and with that culture you have this culture of you have your websites and your annual reports, all that look really good and rosy. But when you start to talk to individuals who are minoritized, you start to hear the different hidden and shadow cultures that they experience within the organization. On top of that, we've got institutional, structural, systemic discrimination. We've got everyday discrimination, including banter, and how negative banter creates microaggressions or micro inequalities. And those micro inequalities come out of our unconscious biases, which I'll talk you through in a moment. But there is also one of the biggest barriers is that lack of psychological safety, that fear of being judged and not knowing. And sometimes we fear it not because it's happened to us before, but because we've either heard something, or we've been let down, or we've experienced other people. But there are lots of different reasons. So when it comes to our unconscious bias, to me, there's a very simple definition. And unconscious bias is really our unintentional people preferences. We tend to group those that we like into our in-groups and those that we like less into our out-groups based on any factor that, that we feel is part of who we are. We tend to draw in those that are similar to us and push out those who are different. And and those that are different, we tend to treat all the same. We talk about, there's lots of conversations around migrants, and there's lots of conversations that assume that every single migrant is the same. Every single one of them is different. So our unconscious bias leads to micro incivilities, micro inequalities, microaggressions, and these are all different levels of banter. From playful banter that we don't think is harmful, calling people names, but leading to excluding people and isolating people, and those create microaggressions and micro incivilities. And what we're talking about here is impacting people where, one, they don't want to come to work, or two, they go home feeling really bad, and and taking that experience of being in the office back home with them. Nobody should ever experience that. So what can we start doing about it? So for everybody, there are lots of roles that we can play. And again, this isn't just about each one of us being an ally to everybody else. Sometimes it's allyship within minority groups. So individuals from minority groups supporting other individuals from minority groups. But mostly it's about supporting people who are different to us. So we've got a brilliant role that we can play, and that is of allyship. And that's about using our privilege. It's about not having the inequalities or the inconveniences of somebody from a minoritized group will experience every day. But also it's about having a privilege, i.e., to me, my privilege is anything from having a pen that somebody else doesn't have, from having a presentation that I can share with somebody, from having a friend that is brilliant at presentations or speaking, to introduce them to this individual, or just having the knowledge that I have around diversity, equity, and inclusion and sharing it with people. That's my privilege. My privilege is anything that I have that somebody else doesn't. It's not about wealth. It's about the small things that we can be doing. It's about the ability to say hello to somebody. I say hello to everybody I pass. When I'm dog walking, I will say hello to to some people who are really miserable and still walk on by, even when I've said hello. That doesn't bother me because I've done my bit. But a lot of people will say hello. So, my privilege is having that voice and wanting to use it. So privilege is about anything that we have that others don't. Allyship is about, supporting those who are different to us. Being in that dominant group, but supporting those in the out groups. It's about being sympathetic towards those experiencing, whether it's banter, whether it's discrimination, but helping them without taking it as, our own issue. It's not about supporting ourselves. It's about educating ourselves about the different issues that and different identities and challenges that people experience. It's about owning the discomfort. And what I mean by discomfort, it's about having those uncomfortable conversations with people. I always say to when I'm starting a conversation with people, I will always start that conversation with, tell me about yourself. And what that does is it starts getting people to tell me more about who they are. But they start opening up. And then when I finish that starter question, I will top it up by saying, now tell me a bit more, with a smile. And you'd be amazed at how much more they tell you, because you've started to build trust. You're not just asking them the question you ask everybody else. You want them to go deeper. And by just asking that second question, that's the thing that starts to build up trust with other people. So it's about acknowledging that, that their privilege and utilizing it proactively, and just thinking about what privileges you have and how can you support others. It's about openly reflecting and making changes and taking actions to support those minoritized. So another question for you. So this is an allyship scale that starts off at level 1. So you have no awareness or actions of diversity, equity, and inclusion. You'll have level 2 as a bystander. So you're aware of issues, but you do absolutely nothing. You might be performative, where you are liking everything you see, but not really acting. Or you might be active in terms of starting to learn more about your biases, your blind spots, and learning more about what you don't know about yourself, and having those uncomfortable conversations. Or it might be proactive in terms of your growing awareness. You're starting to be, starting to try and step into the shoes of others, and you're starting to sponsor them. And by sponsoring, it's literally supporting or giving away your privilege. Level 6 is about being an upstander. It's about showing that commitment, organizing events, creating networks, but also it's about challenging the status quo. So where are you on the allyship scale? I love the honesty. Again, by identifying these, it helps us understand what we need to be doing in order to grow. And again, be more active in terms of being an ally. Okay, so where do you want to be? And again, a lot of this is about how comfortable you are, but also it's about what the organization is doing to support you to become more comfortable to be an ally and to have the resources to be an ally. Brilliant. Thank you. Keep adding if you can. The most important question here is, what are you going to do to move from where you are to where you want to be? Everybody has shown that they want to, become more of an ally or move up that allyship scale. But what are you going to do to get there? rethink my uncomfortable reactions. Absolutely. Listen better. Ask more questions. Step in where necessary. When we start to call out things and people notice, that has a massive impact, not just on the behavior of the individual, but also it's given permission to others to start challenging. Call out mistreatment, learn more, be curious. I need to overcome my own discomfort. It took me years to overcome my own discomfort, and I'm still uncomfortable with certain things. I've been doing this 24 years. I know that much about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It might be that much more than other people, but there's that much to know. The thing is, I don't need to know everything. I need to know where to access things, but I don't need to know everything. Be braver, engage more, keep learning. Brilliant. Okay, there's about 3 questions left before we finish, and we will finish on time. So I've chucked lots at you in a short period of time. There's a video that I wanted to show you, but I haven't been able to, only because it would have taken us over, but I will send you copies of the videos. And yeah, so what resonated with you from today's session? My next question will be, well, I won't tell you for a few minutes. The self-reflection and of my own experience was really helpful. And, and I really do genuinely thank you all for being uncomfortable, because I know some of you put comments in there that you will be uncomfortable about. And honestly, that's my favorite. Second question, tell me a bit more. And I do it with a smile. And I promise you, people tell me about their kids. They tell me about the volunteering opportunities. They tell me more than, some managers find out in 10 years about their staff. Where we are as an organization in the scale, understanding more about unconscious bias. And again, I've literally touched the surface of lots of different topics and what I call the foundations of creating that inclusive workplace. Nobody should feel that they should cloak themselves. We need to create those safe psychological environments where people can, be who they are. And I promise you, small things. I've grown a reputation by talking about the small things that we can be doing. So what are you going to do as a result of this workshop? And again, it's, some of the programs, and we're really fortunate that, one, we support individuals who are starting up their businesses in marketing, in comms. And what we do is we get them to focus their businesses on being an inclusive internal comms organization, an inclusive marketing organization. And literally just by changing the language is actually getting them more work, because more and more employers want to work with and be associated with and partner with organizations that are actively promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. But also we're working, one thing I commend the sector for is all coming together to actually, put this on. So thank you. I'm conscious of time, but please keep adding to this whilst I sort of talk you through the final slide. So once again, thank you all very much for giving up your time, this evening. Really, really appreciated. We will combine it with the other feedback from the last webinar. So what next? One, we're going to assess feedback from all the webinars. We're going to create an action plan to include actions for attraction, retention, development, and progression. We're going to do some stakeholder mapping, and build a database. I mean, I've put 200 organizations in terms of, mosques, synagogues, temples, Asian women's projects, African Caribbean centers, disability organizations, LGBT organizations. By the time I'm finished, there's more likely to be about 400. But that's about helping you to engage with different communities that are out there and increasing the potential for recruitment. So I just want to say thank you all very much. I'm going to stop sharing. Yes, Adrian, any final words from you?
Just to thank you from me too. Thank you, Camille. I think it was really informative and learned so much from just listening to you. And thank everybody who's given up their hour this evening to join us. I think yeah, the participation was brilliant, and what was said was really honest. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I promise you, what you've shared is so valuable. Have a wonderful evening. And we look forward to sharing the feedback with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks. Bye.